I have here a list of random names and I want to apply a function to them so that only the first letter is capitalized and all other letters are made small. In this case, both the J and the D should be small and the first D should remain big. Here I want this small k to be capitalized. First I'll have to make that function and then I'll show my original method to replace values in a column instead of creating a new column, and then I'll show a new method I was shown. Normally when you make a function you want to create a parameter and then a blank query, but because this is such a simple function, I'm going to keep it inside one function query because there's no reason to add more clutter. Since this is a function, I started with an equal sign and then open close parentheses. In here I have to write what arguments do I want to be passed into the function. I'll call this name, which means this is the keyword I want to refer to in the code, and this should be text, and that will help the user a little bit. Then you write the rocket ship operator, which is the equal sign greater than, and then because I want to split this into multiple steps, I'm going to use the inner query trick, which I haven't shown yet, but this is what you get when you look into Advanced Editor. You'll see this let in statements. My first step is going to be grabbing the first letter from the name, and I'm simply doing this let in order to split the function into multiple steps. This is what you would get if you created a normal query and then converted that into a function. Because I can't do it here, it only has this one step. So I'm sort of getting the best of both worlds. And the first letter is simple, that's just saying text start. And what is my text? That is name, the argument that's passed. And I want to grab only the first letter. And then I write a comma, because again, this is what you get in Advanced Editor. So this is a step within a step, because my step is actually source. Then I want to capitalize the first letter, which again, there's a convenient function called text_upper. And since I only have one letter, it will only capitalize the first letter. So now I already have the first portion solved. Now I need to make all the other letters small, which means I first want to grab all the remaining letters, which I can use the text middle function for. And the convenient part is, as you can see here, the first argument is the text and the second is my starting position. And if I don't provide a count, it will simply take everything to the right of my starting position, which means I can simply pass in name. I can start after the first position, which means I grab from position 2, including position 2 and everything after. Now that I have that, I want to make it small, which is then using the text lower. And then I don't want to apply it to name, I want to apply it to remaining letters. And then lastly, I now have my first letter and all other letters, which means I need to concatenate them, which is then saying the first letter capitalized with the ampersand, because this is text, and then remaining letters small. And because I'm using this let in syntax, I need to say what is my last step. That is, what is the step I want to print when I call the function, which is then the last step, concatenate string. And I can then try typing in one of them, and then I can write invoke, which will then create a new query, which does exactly what I want. And I can also see this person who has no capital letters, he will also be correct once that function has been called. Which means I don't need this query, it was just to show it. Which now leads to portion 2. The original way to invoke a function is to go up here in add column and invoke it. And then I can say what is my new name, I'll call that invoke. I want to use the function query1, and actually I should rename that, meaning this is the normal way where you use the GUI buttons. I want to call this function, which takes an argument called name, and then I can see, well, I only have the one column, so that's very easy, and I will then get this, and that is exactly what I want. But I now have this extra column, which means I would need to go in and delete this column, and then I'd need to rename this column, and then maybe you'd have a step where you needed to change the positioning of it, and that's annoying because that's 3 extra steps. Instead, what I can do is first I want to duplicate this because I have both the original and the new method. My original method is to go up under transform and say replace values, and here I'll just say replace A with B because I simply need this starting code which I can then act on. Where my original method is to say I want to say for each row go into the random names copy column, and that's a bit inconvenient for me actually because it has that dash, which means I believe I need to write it like this, random names dash copy. Yeah, which means it now grabs the value and then it says, well, when you find this value, which of course it's going to find that because that is the value of each cell, well, then I want you to replace that with B. But I don't want to replace it with B. I want to replace it with the function func, first letter, big or small. And I want to apply that to this column. And now I'm not sure with my, yeah. It would help if I wrote each in front because I'm saying for each row go in and look at what is the value in this column. And then when you find that value, because of course you're going to find it, I want to replace that value by this function applied on this column. And then do that for each row. When you're using this function, it's important to remember what each means. As expected, it does exactly what you want, but this might be a bit confusing syntax. Again, you could see me mess up because I forgot to write each, and because I have this dash, I need to remember the hashtag quotation syntax, which normally you wouldn't need if you have a normal name like invoke or random space names, and I would call that my original method. The new method I was shown is to, instead of using the replace values, I'll just go into format and grab a random function. It's not important. I just need this code snippet. And what this does is, well, it goes into one or multiple columns, which you pass in as a list, hence the curly brackets. And then it's saying, upon this table, I want to transform the columns within this list. The first column I want to act on, in this case, the only column I want to act on, is called the random names column. And the function I want to apply is then text lower. And you'll notice there's no open close parentheses, and there's no underscore, and there's no each keyword. It's simply saying, upon this column, apply this function. Meaning, I think my original method, that's going to scan each individual row, which might be slower. Whereas this is simply saying, for all values, all at once, do this function. I think it will be faster than my method. In any case, the code is easier to read, especially when you want to do what I'm doing right now. If you wanted to do a condition like, say, if the value is above 50,000, you want to change it, otherwise keep it, then you wouldn't want to use this method. In my case, where I do want to change every single value, it's a good idea. And because I don't have that open close parentheses or each or the underscore, I can simply write in the name of my function and then it will update. And this is again exactly what I want. So that is called the new method, which I got from a course by the company called Super Users. So I have to remember to give credit. That was everything I wanted to show. Yep.